On this month, we have the rise of the Phoenix, George Jackson. From the day that we landed from Arthur Ashe, when the Wimbledon game birthed the Henrietta Lacks. Second, J Baldwin born with the fire next time.
I got shoes, you got shoes, all of God's children got shoes.
Nat Turner and George Jackson, American revolutionaries, American freedom fighters. Nat Turner's rebellion, historically known as the Southampton Insurrection, was a rebellion that took place in Southampton County, Virginia in August 1831. Led by Nat Turner, the rebels, made up of enslaved Americans, killed between 55 and 65 white people, making it one of the most significant slave revolts in U.S. history. There was widespread fear amongst the white population in the aftermath of the rebellion. Militia and mobs killed as many as 120 enslaved people and free black Americans in retaliation. After the trials, the Commonwealth of Virginia executed 56 enslaved people accused of participating in the rebellion, including Nat Turner himself. Many blacks who had not participated were also persecuted in the Revolutionary Act. Due to Nat Turner being educated and a preacher, Southern state legislatures subsequently passed new laws prohibiting the education of both enslaved and free blacks. Southerners restricted assembly and other civil liberties for free blacks, and required white ministers to be present at all worship services. Nat Turner was enslaved in Southampton County, Virginia in the early 19th century. He thought that revolutionary violence would force whites to acknowledge the brutality of slavery. Turner said he wanted to spread terror and alarm among whites. Turner began communicating his plans to a small circle of trusted fellow slaves. All his initial recruits were other slaves from his neighborhood. These scattered men had to find ways to communicate their intentions without revealing the plot. Songs may have tipped the neighborhood members to movements. It is believed that one of the ways Turner summoned fellow conspirators to the woods was through the use of particular songs. Turner, through his religious conviction, eagerly anticipated God's signal to slay my enemies with their own weapons. He prepared for an uprising against the slaveholders in Southampton County. Beginning in February 1831, Turner interpreted atmospheric conditions as signs to devise a plan for the revolt. An annular solar eclipse on February 12, 1831, was visible in Virginia and much of the southeastern United States. Turner envisioned this as a black man's hand reaching over the sun. Illness prevented Turner from starting the rebellion as planned on Independence Day, July 4, 1831. The conspirators used the delay to extend planning. On August 13th, an atmospheric disturbance made the Virginia sun appear bluish-green, possibly the result of a volcanic plume produced by the eruption of Fernandina Island off the coast of Sicily. Turner took this, like the earlier eclipse, as a divine signal and started the rebellion a week later on August 21st, 1831. The rebellion expanded from several trusted slaves to over 70 enslaved and free blacks, some of whom were on horseback. They were armed with knives, hatchets, and blunt instruments. Firearms were too difficult to collect and would have drawn unwanted attention. The Revolutionary Act would commence. Turner's slave owner and his family were the first to be eliminated. The rebels then traveled from house to house, freeing slaves and killing their oppressors. The state militia suppressed the rebellion at Belmont Plantation on the morning of August 23rd. The militia had twice the manpower of the rebels and 3 companies of artillery. Turner was not captured, but survived in hiding for more than 30 days afterward. Within a day of suppressing the rebellion, the local militia was joined by detachments from the USS Nantucket and USS Warren in Norfolk and militias from neighboring counties in Virginia and North Carolina. In Southampton County, blacks suspected of participating in the rebellion were beheaded by the militia, and their severed heads were mounted on poles at crossroads as a grisly form of intimidation. A local road, now Virginia State Route 658, was called Blackhead Signpost Road after it became the site of one such display. Rumors quickly spread that the slave revolt had reached as far south as Alabama. The fear and alarm resulted in white violence against blacks on flimsy pretenses. The editor of the Richmond Whig described the scene as the slaughter of many blacks without trial and under circumstances of great barbarity. The violence continued for 2 weeks after the rebellion. Confederate General Richard Epps, a slave owner and a surgeon, ordered a halt to the killing. In a letter to the New York Evening Post, Reverend G. W. Powell wrote that many Negroes were killed every day. The exact number will never be known. A company of militia from Hartford County, North Carolina, reportedly killed 40 blacks in one day and took $23 and a gold watch from the dead. Captain Solon Borland, leading a contingent from Murfreesboro, North Carolina, condemned the acts because it was a tantamount to theft from the white owners of the slaves. Modern historians concur that the militias and mobs killed as many as 120 blacks, most of whom were not involved with the rebellion. Turner eluded capture for 6 weeks but remained in Southampton County. According to author Terry Bison, Turner's wife Cherry was beaten and tortured in an attempt to get her to reveal his plans and whereabouts. Following a raid on the Reese plantation, the Richard Constitutional Whig reported on September 26, 1831, that some papers were given up by his wife under the lash. According to the authentic and impartial narrative, also published in 1831, journal entries belonging to Turner were in her possession after Nat's escape. On October 30th, 1831, a farmer named Benjamin Phipps discovered Turner hiding in Southampton County in a depression in the earth created by a large fallen tree covered with fence rails. Around 1 p.m. on October 31st, Turner arrived at the prison in Jerusalem. While awaiting trial, Turner allegedly confessed knowledge of the rebellion to attorney and slavery apologist Thomas R. Gray. In October of 1897, Virginia newspapers reported that Nat Turner's skeleton was being used as a medical specimen by Dr. H. U. Stevenson. Most of Turner's alleged conspirators were tried in Southampton County, with some trials occurring in neighboring Sussex County or other nearby counties. 30 slaves were convicted, of which 18 were hanged and 20 were sold out of the state. 15 were acquitted. 4 of the 5 free blacks tried were acquitted. The 5th was hanged. During the Revolution, the Virginia General Assembly VGA targeted free blacks with an African relocation bill and a police bill denying them trials by jury and criminal punishment by slavery and relocation. The VGA received petitions from at least 7 slave owners asking to be compensated for slaves lost without trial because of the insurrection. They were all rejected. The VGA debated the future of slavery the following spring. Some urged gradual emancipation, but the pro-slavery side prevailed after Virginia's leading intellectual, Thomas Roderick Dew, president of the College of William and Mary, published a pamphlet defending the wisdom and benevolence of slavery and the folly of its abolition. Laws were passed in all slave states except Maryland, Kentucky, and Tennessee, criminalizing teaching blacks to read and write, and restricting blacks from holding religious meetings without a licensed white minister. Other slave-holding states also enacted legal restrictions on black activities. Possession of abolitionist publications was criminalized in Virginia and other southern states. In the aftermath of the revolt, whites did not try to interpret Turner's motives and ideas. Antebellum slave owners were shocked by the rebellion and feared further slave violence. To them, Turner became a symbol of terrorism and violent retribution. Images were published and depicted armed black men attacking white men, women, and children. These haunted white Southerners and showed slave owners how vulnerable they were. Northern and Southern states shared many of the same fears. A proposal to create a college for African Americans in New Haven, Connecticut was overwhelmingly rejected in the New Haven excitement. The fear caused by Turner's revolution and the concerns raised in the emancipation debates that followed resulted in politicians and writers defining, quote, slavery as a positive good, end quote. And Thomas Dew was among those writers. Other Southern writers began to promote a paternalistic ideal of improved Christian treatment of slaves. This was in part to avoid such rebellions. Dew and others believed that they were civilizing blacks, who were then still mostly American-born through slavery. The writings were collected in the pro-slavery argument as maintained by the most distinguished writers of the Southern states, 1853. Some Virginians wanted to remove all blacks from the state's Tidewater and Piedmont regions or deport all from the state. In 1852, the Virginia branch of the American Colonization Society sent 243 black Virginians to Liberia. Nat Turner, an American revolutionary and American freedom fighter. Hey everyone, thank you for watching. We really appreciate you for staying informed and staying updated and staying educated. You have a chance, and I know you will have a chance, go to etmmediagroupstore.com, etmmediagroupstore.com to help support what we're doing. Especially we got that new fire merch, 40 acres and a mule. So go ahead, pick up your shirt or your tank top, because I know it's hot out there all across the world, and especially here in the States. So go ahead and pick up yours. All right, please like, share, and subscribe, and let's get back to it. George Lester Jackson, September 23rd, 1941, ascended August 21st, 1971, was an American author, activist, and prisoner. While serving an indeterminate sentence for stealing $70 from a gas station in 1961, Jackson became involved in the revolutionary activity and co-founded the Revolutionary Black Guerrilla Family. In 1970, he was one of the 3 prisoners known as Soledad Brothers, charged with the murder of correctional officer John Vincent Mills in the aftermath of a prison fight. The same year he published Soledad Brother, The Prison Letters of George Jackson, a combination of autobiography and manifesto addressed to an African American audience. The book became a bestseller and earned Jackson personal fame. Jackson was killed by prison guards in 1971 during an escape attempt in which 3 prison guards and 2 inmates were killed. He never went to trial for the Mills murder. Born in Chicago, Illinois, Jackson was the second son of Lester and Georgia Bay Jackson's 5 children. He spent time in the California Youth Authority Corrections Facility in Paso Robles due to several juvenile convictions, including armed robbery, assault, and burglary. During his first years at San Quentin State Prison, Jackson became involved in the revolutionary activity. He was described by white prison officials as egocentric and antisocial. In 1966, Jackson met and befriended W.L. Nolan, who introduced him to Marxist and Maoist ideology. The two founded the Black Guerrilla Family in 1966 based on Marxist and Maoist political thought. In speaking of his ideological transformation, Jackson remarked, quote, "I met Marx, Lenin, Trotsky, Engels, and Mao when I entered prison, and they redeemed me," end quote. As Jackson's disciplinary infractions grew, he spent more time in solitary confinement, where he studied political economy and radical theory. He also wrote many letters to friends and supporters, which would later be edited and compiled into the books Soledad Brother and Blood in My Eye. Bestsellers that brought him a great deal of attention from the leftist organizations and intellectuals in the United States and Western Europe. He amassed a following of inmates, including whites and Latinos, and most enthusiastically with other black inmates. In January 1969, Jackson and Nolan were transferred from San Quentin to Soledad Prison. On January 13, 1970, corrections officers Opie G. Miller shot Nolan and two other black prisoners, Cleveland Edwards and Alvin Miller, during a yard riot with members of the Aryan Brotherhood, killing all three. Following Nolan's death, Jackson became increasingly confrontational with corrections officials and spoke often about the need to protect fellow inmates and take revenge on correction officers, employing that Jackson called, quote, selective retaliatory violence, end quote. On January 17, 1970, Jackson, Frida Drumgo, and John Cluchette were charged with murdering a corrections officer, John V. Mills, who was allegedly beaten and thrown from the third floor of Soledad's Y Wing. This was a capital offense, and a successful conviction would have put Jackson in the gas chamber. Mills was purportedly killed in retaliation for the shooting deaths of 3 inmates by Miller the previous year. Miller had not been charged with any crime, as a grand jury ruled his actions during the prison fight justifiable homicide. In the aftermath, Jackson, Drumgo, and Cluchette became known as the Soledad Brothers, and activists worked to get the 3 acquitted, being viewed as political prisoners and accused based on their race. The activists also wanted to bring attention to the disproportionate rates of which non-whites were being incarcerated compared to white people, and to the socio-economic factors that led to their imprisonment in the first place. The Soledad Brothers Defense Committee was formed by Faye Stender and had many famous activists, celebrities, and writers join and support the committee. Among these activists was Angela Davis. Davis, while working with the committee, would eventually become a leader of the committee and become a close friend of Jackson. Jackson and Davis corresponded over letters frequently, and Jackson had sent a manuscript of his book Soledad Brother, The Prison Letters of George Jackson, and asked her to read it and asked for her help in improving it. On August 7, 1970, George Jackson's 17-year-old brother Jonathan P. Jackson burst into a Marin County courtroom with an automatic weapon, freed prisoners James McLean, William A. Christmas, and Ruchelle McGee, and took Judge Harold Haley, Deputy District Attorney Gary Thompson, and 3 jurors hostage to demand the release of the Soledad Brothers. Police killed Haley, Jackson, Christmas, and McLean as they attempted to drive away from the courthouse. Eyewitness testimony suggests Haley was hit by a fire discharge from a sawed-off shotgun that had been fastened to his neck with adhesive tape by the abductors. Thomas, McGee, and one of the jurors were wounded. The case made national headlines. Angela Davis, who owned the weapons used in the hostage taking, was later acquitted of conspiracy, kidnapping, and murder. McGee, the sole survivor among the attackers, eventually pleaded guilty to aggravated kidnapping and was sentenced to life imprisonment in 1975. McGee was in prison for over 60 years. He was later released in 2023 under California's compassionate release law passed that year. Before George Jackson's demise, Jackson rewrote his will, leaving all royalties as well as control of his legal defense fund to the Black Panther Party. Jackson's funeral was held at St. Augustine's Episcopal Church in Oakland, California on August 28, 1971. George Jackson, an American revolutionary, an American freedom fighter. For those who stand up for freedom and justice, we salute you. Black August.